Picture this. It's March 17th, 2024, a Monday morning in Toronto. A 23-year-old student from Punjab sits in a shared basement apartment staring at his laptop screen. His hands are shaking. The email subject line reads, "Study permit application refused." He paid a consultancy firm $40,000. His father sold half the family farm to raise the money. The dream was simple. Get to Canada, get educated, get permanent residency, bring the family over, live the good life. But the dream just died. We've been told this is about immigration control. We've been told this is about housing shortages. We've been told this is about protecting borders. That's the story they want you to believe. But here's the truth they won't say out loud. This isn't about migration policy. This is about a financial house of cards collapsing. For a decade, Western nations ran the biggest education Ponzi scheme in modern history. And now the ledger is demanding payment. For 10 years, countries like Canada, Australia, the UK, and even the United States turned international students into a cash crop. They weren't investing in education. They were farming tuition fees. The numbers were staggering. In Canada alone, international students contributed $22 billion annually to the GDP. That's more than the entire forestry industry, more than auto parts, more than wheat exports. In Australia, education became the fourth largest export. Think about that. Education as an export. Not timber. Not minerals. Students. Warm bodies with credit cards and dreams. Universities didn't see scholars. They saw walking ATMs. A domestic student in Ontario paid around $8,000 a year in tuition. An international student paid $30,000. Same classroom, same professor, 4 times the price. This was the business model. Charge foreigners a premium. Use that cash to subsidize the locals. Keep the lights on. Fund the research labs. Pay the pension plans. But it wasn't just universities playing this game. Landlords were in on it, too. A 3-bedroom house in Brampton that used to rent for $2,000 a month suddenly had 8 students crammed inside paying $600 each. Do the math. That's $4,800 a month for a property, worth maybe $400,000. The ROI was obscene. Strip mall businesses exploded. Phone shops, driving schools, cheap curry joints, remittance centers. Entire suburban economies were built on the backs of international students working cash jobs and sending money home. It was a gold rush. Everyone was getting rich, except the students themselves. And here's where the addiction kicked in. Government saw the GDP bump and got hooked. Why fix the housing crisis when you can just import more renters? Why invest in domestic training programs when you can import trained workers? Why build infrastructure when immigration makes the GDP number go up every quarter? It was economic heroin. And like all addictions, it required bigger and bigger doses to maintain the high. In 2013, Canada had about 200,000 international students. By 2023, that number hit 1.1 million. That's a 500% increase in a decade. The population of San Francisco dropped into a country with a housing stock that hadn't grown proportionally since the 90s. It was madness, and everyone knew it. But the money was too good to stop. Then the cracks started to show. Reports began surfacing of students sleeping in shifts. Hot bedding, they called it. You rent a mattress for 8 hours. When you leave for your shift at Tim Hortons, someone else takes your spot. Food banks in cities like Surrey and Mississauga reported that 50% of their clients were international students. These weren't people coming to study. These were people coming to survive. And the public started noticing. Rent was exploding. A one-bedroom apartment in Toronto that cost $1,500 in 2015 was suddenly $2,800. Wages weren't keeping up. Locals were being priced out. And the scapegoat was obvious. Blame the students, blame the immigrants. Blame the brown faces working at Subway. The political pressure became unbearable. So in January 2024, the Canadian government blinked. Immigration Minister Mark Miller stood at a podium and announced the unthinkable. A cap. For the first time in decades, Canada would limit the number of international student permits. The target was a 35% cut for 2024, then another 10% cut for 2025. The final number was 437,000 permits. Sounds like a lot, right? It's not, because the real kill shot wasn't the cap. It was the attestation letter. Previously, you applied directly to the federal government for a study permit. Now, every province got a quota. And to even apply, you needed a provincial attestation letter, a PAL. Think of it as a golden ticket before the golden ticket. And here's the kicker. The provinces decided who got the letters, and they zeroed out the private colleges. Let me explain what that means. For years, public colleges in Ontario had been running a scam. They would partner with private career colleges. The public college, say Conestoga or Seneca, would license its name and curriculum to a private operator. That private operator would set up shop in a strip mall. No campus, no library, no professors, just a room with desks and a website. They would pump out diplomas in business management or hospitality. Tens of thousands of them. The students never stepped foot on the real campus. They didn't care. They weren't there for the education. They were there for the post-graduation work permit. The PGWP was the holy grail. Graduate from a Canadian institution. Get a 3-year work permit. Apply for permanent residency. Bring the family. That was the pathway. And it worked. Until it didn't. With the new attestation rules, those private colleges got cut off. No more letters, no more permits, no more students. The business model evaporated overnight, and the fallout was biblical. Conestoga College, which had been the poster child for this enrollment explosion, saw revenues collapse. At one point, nearly 100% of their growth was international students. Now they were projecting deficits in the hundreds of millions. Other colleges started announcing layoffs. Programs were being cut. Campuses were being closed. The gold rush was over, and the ghost towns were forming. But Canada wasn't alone. Australia was running the same scam, just with a different accent. They called it the VET sector, Vocational Education and Training. Sounds legitimate, right? It wasn't. Here's how it worked. You arrive in Australia on a student visa tied to a real university. You pay the first semester fees. Expensive. Then 3 weeks later, you transfer to a VET provider, a cheap private college operating out of an office building. You pay a fraction of the cost, and then you never go to class. The college marks you present. You work full-time, drive Uber, wash dishes, do construction. The visa stays valid. The college gets paid. You make money. Everyone wins. Except the system, because this wasn't education. This was a work visa with extra steps. The Australian government looked at their migration numbers and panicked. Net migration hit 500,000 in a single year. Housing prices in Sydney and Melbourne were in freefall, not because of supply, because of demand. And voters were angry. So in March 2024, Australia introduced the genuine student test. It sounds bureaucratic, but it was a weapon. Immigration officers were given broad discretion to reject applications. Does this course make sense for your career? If you're a 30-year-old engineer applying for a certificate in commercial cookery, the answer is no. Rejected. If you have a gap in your study history, rejected. If the course is suspiciously cheap, rejected. Visa refusal rates for students from India, Nepal, and Pakistan skyrocketed. We're talking rejection rates of 20 to 30% overnight. And then they went for the wallet. In mid-2024, Australia doubled the student visa application fee. It went from 710 Australian dollars to 1,600. And it's climbing. That fee is non-refundable. You get rejected, they keep your money. It's a tax on hope. But the killing blow came in the form of a cap. Just like Canada, Australia announced a national planning level for 2025, 270,000 new student commencements. Universities were furious. The University of Sydney and Melbourne warned that research funding, which is cross-subsidized by international tuition, would collapse. But Canberra didn't care. The message was clear. We want rich kids from wealthy families. We want students who will pay $50,000 a year and leave when they graduate. We don't want gig workers disguised as students. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the United Kingdom was having its own reckoning. For years, the UK had a secret weapon in the international student market: dependence. Unlike the US or Canada, where bringing your spouse and kids was a nightmare, the UK was relatively open. If you came for a one-year master's degree, you could bring your family. One partner studies, the other works. It was a family investment strategy, popular among mature students from Nigeria, India, and Ghana. But in January 2024, the Conservative government banned it. International students, except those on research-based postgraduate programs, could no longer bring dependents. The impact was instant. The number of dependent visas issued fell by 85%. And then the Labour government came in. Everyone thought they'd reverse course. They doubled down. In May 2025, the Immigration White Paper dropped 2 bombs. First, the graduate route was slashed. The post-study work visa went from 24 months to 18. That might not sound like much, but it's the difference between landing a career-track job and packing your bags the moment your lease ends. Second, the international levy. The government proposed a tax on the tuition fees universities collect from international students. Let that sink in. Universities were already using international fees to subsidize domestic students who lose money on every seat. And now the government wanted to tax the profit that kept the lights on. The result is financial catastrophe. According to the Office for Students, 75% of UK higher education institutions could be in deficit by the end of the 2025 to 2026 academic year. 24 universities are officially at risk of insolvency. And then there's the United States. For a while, America was the beneficiary of everyone else's chaos. When Canada closed its doors, students looked south. But in 2025, with the return of the Trump administration, the welcome mat was yanked. The rejection rate for F1 student visas hit 41%, the highest in over a decade. If you're applying from Africa, the numbers are even worse. Rejection rates from West Africa hovered near 60%. But the real shock came in December 2025. The White House announced travel ban 2.0. Starting January 1st, 2026, nationals from nearly 40 countries would face partial or full visa suspensions. The list included major student source countries: Nigeria, Ghana, Malawi. The administration called it security vetting. The reality was a firewall, and it got worse for those already inside. In August 2025, the Department of Homeland Security proposed ending duration of status. Previously, if you were on a student visa, you could stay as long as you were studying. Now they want to cap visas at fixed 4-year terms. Need 5 years for a PhD? Too bad. Reapply. Pay new fees. Risk rejection all over again. The bridge from student to worker is being dismantled plank by plank. The H-1B visa is under extreme scrutiny. The OPT program is being tightened. The message from Washington is loud. We don't want you to stay. So let's talk about the economic blowback, because this is where the Ponzi scheme collapses. For a decade, international students were a stimulus package. They pumped billions into local economies. Now pull that money out. What happens? The real estate market craters. The Brampton landlord who bought a semi-detached house and stuffed 6 students inside at $500 each is suddenly looking at vacancies. Panic selling begins. The slumlord millionaire business model dies, and when those investors rush for the exit, they drag the local housing market down with them. Strip malls start dying. Who was buying the $10 phone plans? The fast food? The used Honda Civics? International students. Without them, thousands of small businesses are staring at a 30% revenue drop. For lease signs pop up like weeds. And here's the kicker for the locals who think this is good news. You know why your domestic tuition was so low? Because the international students were subsidizing it. They paid 4 times the fees so you could pay 1. With that revenue gone, universities have 2 choices: cut programs or raise tuition. Goodbye arts departments. Goodbye humanities. Below 20% tuition hikes. By 2027, domestic tuition fees in Canada and the UK will rise significantly. The international student boom was a subsidy for the West, and now the bill is coming due. But here's the twist. The demand didn't disappear. It just moved. Students don't stop wanting education because the door is closed. Water finds a crack, and the crack is opening in the east. Germany is watching the Anglosphere commit economic suicide and laughing. Their public universities are effectively tuition-free, even for international students. They just released a strategy to attract Indian talent. While Canada kicks people out, Germany hands out opportunity cards. They need 400,000 immigrants a year to keep their economy afloat, and they're not shy about it. Japan and South Korea are facing demographic cliffs. They're running out of young people. Japan set a target of 400,000 international students by 2033. They're simplifying visas and begging graduates to stay. The culture shock is real. But if the choice is Japan with a job or Canada with a deportation order, the choice is easy. Then there's transnational education. Why move to London and pay $2,000 a month in rent when you can get a University of London degree in Malaysia or Dubai? Western universities, terrified of losing revenue, are opening satellite campuses abroad. The degree is the same. But the migration doesn't happen. The West keeps the tuition money, but loses the labor force. It's the ultimate hedge. Until the source countries realize they don't need the Western brand anymore. China is playing the long game. Their Study in China initiative is targeting the global South. Students from Pakistan, Thailand, and Africa who can't afford $50,000 in tuition in Boston or Sydney. Full scholarships. English-taught medical degrees. A direct pipeline into Belt and Road infrastructure projects. The Asian tigers are returning. Malaysia and Vietnam are positioning themselves as education hubs. Why go to Canada and risk deportation when you can go to Kuala Lumpur, pay a fraction, and live in a booming economy? And then there's the sleeping giant, India. New Delhi finally did the math. Billions were flowing out every year to pay Western tuition, propping up foreign universities while draining domestic capital. So the strategy flipped. Internationalization at home. Invite the West in on Indian terms. Australia's Deakin University has already opened a campus in Gift City, Gujarat, and more are lining up. The message to the middle class is unmistakable. It used to be go west to succeed. Now it's bring the West here. Keep the money inside the system. If this trend holds, the international student boom didn't die. It migrated east, and the West is about to lose its monopoly on global talent for good. So where does that leave students right now? The old playbook is obsolete. The blind bet is over. A plane ticket is no longer a promise. It's a gamble. Follow policy, not brochures. Ignore rankings. Watch immigration ministers, not marketing departments. The rules change weekly. Specialization is safety. General degrees are exposure. Healthcare, advanced STEM, and trade skills remain the last relatively secure paths. The gold rush of the 2010s is ending in a correction messy, painful, unavoidable. Universities will fail. Housing bubbles will deflate. Students will absorb the losses. Because in the end, this wasn't about protection. It was about control. And when control collapsed, the doors slammed shut. And the United States, this so-called shining city on a hill, just put up a wall. The irony is staggering. These economies were built on immigration. They imported ambition, intelligence, and hunger from every corner of the world. Then, once the bill came due, they told those people to leave. History will remember this as one of the most severe self-inflicted economic wounds of the 21st century. Because here's the truth they ignored. The ledger always balances. You can't build prosperity on extraction forever. You can't sell a dream, take the money, and then revoke the promise without consequences. International students paid tuition. They paid rent. They filled labor gaps. They sustained universities and entire industries. And in return, they received rejection letters and deportation orders. But memory cuts both ways. The students will remember. Their home countries will remember. The next generation won't rush westward so easily. They'll go east or stay home. And when that shift settles in, the West will realize what it lost wasn't just revenue or GDP points. It was talent, energy, momentum, the future itself. This is the lesson. Economic systems built on unsustainable models always collapse. Not if when the party ended. The wreckage remains, and the cost won't be measured in years but in decades.